About a month ago, I received an email from my spiritual director. For those that don't know, a spiritual director is something like a therapist for all things spirit-based, faith-based, divine-based. Reverend Amy has a weekly email that goes out trying to help her contacts stay grounded in the moment and connected to their sense of the divine. And about a month ago, the subject line of her email was called, "You don't need to be a hero." Today's reflection, or this reflection of hers, sent me down a meandering path of discovery and contemplation. She lifted up that the hero's journey is modeled after the hunter's journey from prehistoric times, the ones that killed mammoths. And we see the problem with this story as soon as we listen to the carrier bag theory. Only 14% of what has allowed humans to survive is written within the hero's story. The ones who need the carrier bags, the gatherers, the ones who can only tell of the wild oats that they have captured again and again and again. Even when we think about the story of Elizabeth Bennet, the ordeals that she overcame and the joy that she sought, it still kind of fits into that small portion of our lives. But the everyday story of how we live our life and how we move throughout the days and nights, how we keep on keeping on, it does not have to be some wild and heroic story. It need not lead to growth or changes or obstacles to overcome. Our everyday lives are allowed to be as boring as digging tubers and harvesting wild oats and berries. The story of the carrier bag, the story of the hearthkeeper, the story of the unglamorous, the story of the mundane, repetitive, monotonous, and everyday. This is the story that I am keen to build for myself and that I am keen to hear in others. What is it that you do every day without fail? What are the practices that you maintain day in and day out that allow you to stay healthy, that allow you to struggle through 14 months of a worldwide pandemic and still love yourself and the world? And what are the pieces of your life that you continue to do because you didn't realize that they are not actually pleasant, but they feel necessary? These stories are necessary for our lives, for our capacity to witness what it means to be human, for us to grasp the concepts of survival, not because we have to go out and conquer our enemies or the mammoth, but because this is how we survive. Recently, I began to notice that my life had become a bit haphazard. Without the need to leave the house for work or to see other people, I wasn't really following any sort of schedule or system. I ate whenever I wanted to. I sat in front of my computer for most of my day and had my nose in my cell phone for close to the rest of it. I regularly wondered where my time had gone. Why was I always tired and cranky? As I began to pull apart my experiences of the recent weeks and months, I realized that I was living my life like a battle. I was living against the pandemic with both of my hands and fists, trying to overcome the obstacles in my world, instead of just falling into the rhythm of my life. After realizing that I had been attempting to overcome an obstacle that I had so little control over, the end of a pandemic, I decided that I needed to start finding rhythm with what was now the world I lived in. One in which I sit in front of my computer for anywhere from 5 to 9 hours a day and yet have constant trouble focusing. One in which I never leave my house unless I make a distinct effort to do so, where I drink too much coffee and not enough water. So I started using an app on my phone, a technology that I always have nearby and has the ability to remind me to change tasks or realign the things that I am needing. This app that has helped me to realign my story to that of the carrier bag instead of the hero is called Fabulous, and is helping me to rebuild habits that went out of the window when the church year started to get really busy and I became overwhelmed with ministering during a pandemic. Going back to the basics, I did not need to live my life as if I were fighting dragons or attempting to destroy a ring and save the Shire. I needed to wake up every morning and drink water. Make sure that I go outside, no matter how bad the weather is. And I needed to spend time every day focusing on one task while shutting out all other things that would distract me. I'm not sure why there is this ever-present focus on the hero in our world. As Ursula speaks about in her piece, maybe it's because the hero can hold our attention, that his story is more exciting and captivating, because there is something alluring to that story. Going it alone, overcoming the challenges that come up in our lives, and doing it all by ourselves, toughing it out and maybe having a chip on your shoulder about mastering the chaos by yourself. This is another thing that comes alongside the stories of the heroes. They always seem to master everything by themselves. They go it alone, the go it alone type of characters. But when we zoom out and look at the story more wholesomely, we notice that they are not actually alone. Frodo has Sam and the rest of the fellowship, but so do all of the others. For it takes a village to enable others to go out and hunt a mammoth. None of us can do this alone, no matter how much we tell ourselves that we should. I know that I've shared this story here before, but I believe it bears repeating again and again and again. So here it is one more time. In seminary, I had an assignment to make an image of God. I was asked to take home several pipe cleaners and create an image that for me would reflect God, the more ultimate reality, spirit of life, divine. I was asked to create God out of pipe cleaners. I'm not a theist, and I have never been a theist. I grew up in a Unitarian fellowship. Listening to stories about Jesus and God felt like a fairy tale to me. For me, stories from the Bible held the same symbolism of love and morals that Winnie the Pooh stories held. Neither one was more true than the other. And it wasn't until I was a preteen that I actually discovered that Jesus was a real man who had actually existed years and years ago and had really lived through some of those struggles. Before this, he was just a character in my Sunday school classes. But having spent several years working through my own theological reflections has allowed me to claim a belief in God. Not a Christian sense of God, because I'm still not a theist, but using the word God to mean more than just a deity, to mean more than just a proper noun. I believe that God is relationship. God is a verb, the being that I recognize as all-knowing, ever-present, and all-powerful. The concept that holds my moral obligation and the thing that I perceive as the greatest conceivable existence in our world, what God is to me is our relationship. Whether it is my individual relationship with each of you or the special relationship that this group of us here on this screen make together, or the relationship that I have with myself or with the earth or animals, it doesn't really matter. It's the relationship that's important. How we are in that relationship, how we engage the other or how we don't, how we hold the other's emotions and logic, how we choose to change our behaviors because of the relationship, or how we choose to ignore the relationship by not changing. This is my God. So in order to create an image with pipe cleaners for my assignment, I created two people holding hands together to show the space between them, the relationship that I see as God. And for me, this feels a little bit like our carrier bag, the space that holds everything else together. My life now looks a lot like those early gatherers. It is not exciting. It usually isn't very overwhelming, but it's the story that I have chosen to live out. And there is something about that consistency that I'm hoping will help me weather any other storm. I release the stories that no longer fit me, the story of the hero who travels alone and overcomes innumerable obstacles to achieve glory. I've attempted, I don't hold myself to a higher standard and separate from everyone else who doesn't fit, this doesn't fit my understanding of the world. And the stories that we tell are so very important. How we make sense of ourselves and how we make sense of the world is through the stories that we tell. We are all in relationship, connected to one another, gathering, digging, finding rabbits and grouse. This is my story, and I am the author. This is how I choose to write my tale. This is what I believe is so necessary for our world, working together as gatherers, creating livelihood within our community. Thank you for listening.